Hello, this is Douglas. I teach high school literature, and while I'm laid off, I'm preparing an audio subtext lecture based on the film No Country for Old Men. I hope this will preserve all the cataloging details and insight prompted in part by student inquiry over these past 4 years. Subtext here is the simultaneous story along at the same time with the surface plot narrative, as in recurring patterns of numbers or religious symbols, as motifs within the universal themes of destiny versus free will or good versus evil. Simply, this is to read the film explicitly, in lieu perhaps of our subconscious absorbing hidden meanings upon first experiencing the film. Surprisingly, this movie, as text, makes use of literary devices that are cinematically beyond the genre capability of a novel. The adapted screenplay only provides the dialogue, nor do the Coen brothers, in their DVD voiceover, explain why certain objects are placed in each scene. For example, a glass of milk, or even the sound of a toilet flushing. An obvious example of subtext in film is from the famous movie Matrix, where Neo, N-E-O, lives in room 101, and Trinity later enters room 303. This story is about looking for the one. Neo letters spell this, and the name Trinity, of course, evokes the number 3. The opening scene in No Country for Old Men begins with an empty black screen where we are introduced to one of the 3 protagonists via his nostalgic narration. Sheriff Bell, the word bell, connotes sound. And this contrasts with the moving still photos of the Genesis allusion, where in the 4th frame, the peering sun over the triangular pyramid desert mountains evokes the "and then there was light" biblical imagery. Perhaps the barren desert is a harsher Eden, as the movement of increasing light to the first camera pan over the barbed wire accounts for a more ambivalent fallen world of good and evil. The psychological audience effect, per the doctrine of primacy and recency, a fancy way of saying first and last impressions, is enhanced by the final phrase in the final scene of our film, "In all that dark I woke up," which is also a final black screen image, as the story ends with Sheriff Bell again recounting a dream, also concerning the fatherly era. At the same time of these visuals, in scene 1, Bell waxes about generations from Plano, Texas. Family sheriffs, some not even needing to carry guns, in barbed wire comparison or separation from the new, living prophets of destruction, now faced in these drug war times. The murder of a 14-year-old girl, polite to Sheriff Bell, calling him sheriff, doesn't understand the meaning of the phrase crime of passion. For example, manslaughter, unplanned. All of this suggests the disconnect between the old and new, as the murderer said he was planning on killing someone for as long as he could remember, and accepting indifferently that his execution would bring him to hell in only 15 minutes. This, of course, begins the 3 multiple motif, and also connects evil to the second protagonist, because we hear Shigor as we hear the word hell, and he is introduced by way of sound. That is, the boots of both him and the young sheriff walking. If Bell's profession, symbolizing good, and Shigor's criminal status symbolizes evil, and if they are antipodes or opposites, perhaps the similar sound introduction of these 2 characters further grays the archetypical evil versus good. Also, given the sound characteristics of the sheriff's last name, This begs the question concerning the namesake puns of other characters. For example, Moss will have a special meaning and Shigor will have a special meaning as well, Investigator Wells. Shigor, at first not being seen, commences this motif of "did you see me? You didn't see me," and the ghost motif. Returning to the parallelism of the young innocent sheriff walking side by side in perfect tandem to the red blinking lights of the sheriff car. The sound of their boots are indistinguishable. As synesthesia, that is, using sound and interchanging them with visual imagery or other senses that are mixed, as synesthesia, this blurs their symbolic representations. Bell is disconnected from this particular arrest, but mentions the rhythmic word measure as the two step into the car. Ironically, Shigur's head is protected by the young sheriff as he gets in. And since crime can't be measured these times, Bell in defeat laments, quote, "I just don't understand." And as part of the dramatic irony, that is, we in the audience know more than Bell does, who's telling the story. The audience is aware of the visual story, yet also doesn't understand the significance of the hose oxygen tank. So we see that at the same time we hear Sheriff Bell say, "I don't understand." Now the three motif is revisited. There's a good 5 seconds of taking a look at the license plate on the sheriff's car. It's number 720903. An obvious multiple of the number 3. Perhaps this establishes the triangular relationship between Shigor, Bell, and the young sheriff. The beloved, or be-love-id, 3-syllable pronunciation of the focused person within that triangle, here, by process of elimination, must be the arresting officer, because he's the focus, certainly because Bell and Shigor have yet to meet or know of each other. However, Shigor and the young sheriff have a connection, and Sheriff Bell and the younger sheriff have a connection through their work. Now later, Bell laments, telling the sheriff's young wife the bad news of what occurs. Shigor is focused on the young sheriff, yet the exposition, or the background story from the book, provides an explanation for the contrast between his cooperation as he's being arrested and handcuffed to the hellish chaos that occurs moments later in scene 2. Here is Shigor in the middle of the book telling Private Eye Wells, holding him at gunpoint in a hotel room just before he's about to kill him. Shigor reveals his anti-heroic flaw of arrogance. I'm paraphrasing Shigor. It started before that. When I went down to the border, there were some men drinking beer. One of them kept looking at me. When I walked up to the counter to pay, they were grinning, and he said something that was hard to ignore. I paid my bill, stopped, and gestured if he would like to meet me in the parking lot, if he would like to. I waited. They came out. I killed him with a sleeper hold. They gathered around him, not knowing what happened. Later, an hour, I was pulled over and let the sheriff take me in. Not sure why I did this. Perhaps to see if I could extricate myself by an act of will. I believe that one can. But it was a foolish and vain thing to do. The ending segue to the opening scene are parallel highway lines going perfectly straight toward the sheriff's station. Only inches apart, the good versus evil idea appears similarly headed in the same direction.